Hello and welcome to this week's lesson on JavaScript arrays. I'm inside week 3 folder. I just downloaded template, the file template HTML5. I'm going to change its name to arrays.html, and I'm going to open this file with my code editor, and it's our regular template. Next thing I do, I change the title. I'm gonna call this JavaScript Arrays. I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna go back to the folder and I'm going to open this file with Firefox. You know, there's nothing in the file here, so there's nothing between the body tags, and that's why the page is completely empty, but at least we got a title correct. So last week, let's go back to the code editor. Last week we talked about variables, and let's review that for a second before we move on. I'm going to put again all our code inside the script tag, inside the body tag. So I'm going to enter my script tag and right away close it. So how do we create a variable? Remember, a variable is a container. It's a place to store, it's a way of storing information when you're coding. So use the word var before, and let's say we have a variable called first name. And we're going to give it John, the value John. And we can have another variable called last name. I'm going to give it the value of Smith. Oops. And I want to get into the habit of keeping spaces between the equal signs, so it's just a little bit more legible. I'm going to try to do my best to keep on doing it. That's really the best practice. I'm sure there'll be slip and sometimes not do it, but just remember that it's a really very good habit to have. So this is all good and fine, but it means that these single bits of information that belong probably to the same person or to the same object or the same situation are separated into different containers. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to store all information that belongs together in the same location? And that's exactly what arrays are for. If a variable is like a drawer, an array is like a chest of drawers. And how do we create arrays? Pretty much like we create variables. So let's create an array called student. And it's very intuitive. JavaScript allows you to do this a couple different ways. So the student would have a first name, like John, for example. And then we have a comma. And then we can enter maybe the last name, Smith. And then we can add something else, a comma. Let's say we want to enter the student ID, 3794. 37, that really matters, I'm just making this number up. Notice that this is actually a number. And let's add one more bit of information. So this is a student. We have a first name, a last name, and we want to know if the student is currently enrolled. So we want to save this information inside this variable, this array, sorry. So we can enter true, and that is a Boolean value to indicate that the student is currently enrolled. So this is almost correct. So all this information that belongs together is going to be entered inside this array called student, but we're not quite done like that. What we need to do is put angle brackets around our bits of information and a semicolon after. So all of this is it's almost like these were separate variables, all stored inside the same location, inside the same array called student. So you can see how convenient this is, because then you can make sure that what belongs together stays together. The other way sometimes you see of how an array is created with a slightly different syntax. You start the same way. Let me just maybe come up with another array, and we're going to call it customer. And this way you have to use the word new and the word array capitalized with parentheses. And you build it basically the same way. So you're going to enter the information inside with quotes. You can see that this is going to require just a little bit of extra typing, but it's basically the same idea. So I'm going to have a name, Tom, maybe Brown for last name. And what else would we want to enter? Oh, how about the age, 37. That could be just enough. So this is just a different, we are kind of doing the same thing. We're storing this information that belongs together inside an array, but the construction, the syntax is slightly different. Here you only use square brackets, and here you use the word new array and you put the information inside parentheses. And sometimes when you have a lot of information that you want to enter, you can break this down into different lines. So this will be perfectly acceptable. And you want to do this if it helps you to be a little bit more organized and clear. So you can see each value one on your line. You could do the same thing with the other construction, as long as, remember that a browser doesn't care about white spaces inside a document, as long as you don't break up a string. So this is exactly the same thing. And in our particular case, it's not necessary to create some extra lines to organize the data because we don't have a whole lot. If you have a lot of entries inside an array, this probably would be very helpful. Either one works. So either using square brackets or using the word new array and putting information inside parentheses, both constructions work just the same. Now we're going to create another array. I'm going to call it players. I'm going to be using this array for working through some examples. So I'm going to create an array using the square brackets syntax, and I'm just going to give it a bunch of names. So this is an array of players' name. So we're going to have John, we're going to have Kathy, we're going to have Susan. And I can see from the color here of my code that I made a mistake again when I didn't match my quotes. And the last one is going to be Fred. So here I have my array with 4 entries, 4 different names of supposedly players. Something's still not quite right because I have, oh, here we go. That's another unmatched quotes. All right, so how do we access the information stored inside a player? For example, if I wanted to display the first item inside my array, the one with a value of John, how would I do that? Let's use alert to do that. So the alert function, what I'm going to put inside the parentheses? I'm going to put the name of my array, just like you'd be putting the name of your variable. So if players was a single variable, this would be enough. But because players is an array, I have to give it extra information. So if I just do this, let's just test this for a second. I'm going to save this and go to the browser, and I'm going to reload this. Here we go. So if you just use the name of the array, all the different values stored inside the array are being displayed. We have John, Kathy, Susan, and Fred. Okay. But what if I wanted just to display the first item in my array? Well, how about using square brackets? First item, I'm just going to use the number 1. Let's see what's going to happen. I'm going to save because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 items. It would make logical sense to say players, and I'm going to access this value by using number 1. So I'm going to go to Firefox and I'm going to reload this. And it says Kathy. Why? Because in JavaScript, as well as many other different programming languages, arrays don't start at number 1 but start at 0. This is called the index number. So at the index number or index position 1, the number you have to use is 0. Well, that sounded very confusing. At position 1, the index is 0. At position 2, the index is 1, and so forth. So you basically have to always take away 1 from the position to be able to access this particular item. So if I want to display the first item in my array, I will have to say alert players 0, and that will give me hopefully the item with a value of John. Let's save this and go back to Firefox. So the first item comes up is the one in the second position with an index value of 1. And now the second item that's showing up here on the screen is the item in the first position with an index value of 0. Let me go back to the code here. Let's reorganize this a little bit so that it's a little bit more clear. I'm going to add a couple comments. So remember that to add comments in JavaScript, you can use the // You can do that at the beginning of the line, and if you do that, the entire line is going to be commented out, meaning it will not be executed. Or if you want to just add a comment on the same line, you can do it after the command, after this the semicolon. And I'm going to say first item, and here will be second item, and so forth. So if we want to display the fourth item, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth item in our array, I would have to use alert players, because that's the name of the array, and that information is stored in the fourth position. To access the fourth position, you have to use the index 3. I'm going to save that. Go back to the browser. So this is my first item with an index of 0, second item with an index of 1, last item with an index of 3, or fourth item with an index of 3. Go back to the code editor. If you had a much bigger array, sometimes you kind of lose track of how long it is, and there is a way to figure out the length. So let's enter a little bit more space here. So if I want to figure out the length of an array, I can do this. I can use the name of the arrays, and I'm going to put period length, and that would give me that information. So if I want to display that with alert, I can just put it inside my array, and I'm going to comment out here a few alerts so that we don't keep on reopening all the different alert windows all the time. So now this will give us the length of our array. I expect the value is going to be 4 because I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 items, so it should be equal to 4. Save that and go back to browser. And yes, it confirms that the array size is 4. So the array contains 4 items. And this helps if you want, let's say if you had a really long array and you don't want to count how many items you have in this array, but you still want to do something with the last item in your array. Let's say you just want to display with alert. So you could save, for example, the length of the array in a variable. So let's say we're gonna save that in this variable called array length equal players length. So players length gives me the total length, the total number of items in my array, and I'm storing this information inside a variable called array length. Now with that information, I could display the last item of my array using players, and inside the square brackets, the index number doesn't have to be a number. It can be a variable. So I'm going to use array length minus 1. So array length, we know that is equal to 4 because that's the value we got when we figure out the length using player's length. So array length is equal to 4. 4 minus 1 is 3, and that is going to give me the value stored in the last position of this array. So let's see what we get here. And we should get Fred. I better put this inside an alert. There we go. So now we actually can display that information. Save that, go back to the browser. It says that the array has 4 items. I've done something wrong. Let's see what I did. Players array length minus 1. Array length minus 1. What did I do wrong? Alert players length. Oh, here we were. There's something. Oh, I did something. So I have to comment this out. All right, let's see. I still might have done something wrong. We'll find out. Let's save that. Go back. So I'm going to reload this. Okay, so this is a perfect place to remember that you should always have Firebug running. So I'm going to bring this up and see if I can figure out my problem. And I also have my HTML validator. So array length is not defined. Length, oh, I misspelled it. It's GHT instead of TH. So that's what I did. So go back here. So array, there we go. So these two, they have to match. So array length, it's the name of the variable that is going to contain the information about the length of the array. And I'm going to use that variable inside the index. Here I'm going to subtract 1. So at the end, when this operation is calculated, it's going to be players and with the index number of 3. So I'm going to save that, see if I can finally get this right. And there we go. It says Fred, and that's the last item on our array. Okay. So let's go on here a little bit. So what if we want to, so here we figure out how to access array information. What if I wanted to add information, to add extra items to my array? So let me comment out this alert. All right, so let's add some comments here. Adding items to array. Create a little bit of space here. Well, let's say I want to add an extra name to this array called players. I can simply say players, and since I know how many items, I can count how many items there are. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to add a 5th item, and now I have to remember that I always have to subtract 1. So I'm going to use the index of 4, and I'm going to add the value of Tom. Okay, so if I display my array now, so yeah, players, that should give me the whole list here plus Tom at the end. So let's go to the browser. Another of players instead of players. Okay, that goes so fast. More than 2 or 3 lines of code. There's all kind of syntax mistakes you can make. Save that, try this again. There we go. We have a new item in our array, and now we have a total of 5 items: John, Kathy, Susan, Fred, and Tom. Okay. There's also other methods, other ways of adding items to an array. So this is only if we know how many items there are. But what if we just want to add it to the end? We don't care how many items there are. We don't want to figure it out. We can actually use the length property to be able to do that. So this is the name of our array, and we want to add this a bit of information to the end, to the very end of our array. And I know that I can get the length of the array by doing players length. I could actually use the array length, but this is what's measured here. When the array only had 4 items. Now the array has 5 items. So if I use this variable, this is still has the old value. Now the array is bigger, so it's safer to use players length because it's recalculated all the time. Why don't I use length -1? Because I want to add something. So by using the length value, I'm actually adding an item. And I'm going to add another name of Rick. And I'm going to display that. So I added 2 different players. I added player Tom at position 5. And I added Rick at whatever is the last position in this array. Let me save this. So we have John, Kathy, Susan, Fred, Tom, and Rick. And click OK. There's also one more method to add items to the end of an array. So I'm adding items to the end of an array. Okay, this is method 1. This is method 2, and we're going to add one more name using another method. So players, it's my array, and this is kind of funny. So you have to use the method push with parentheses, and inside the parentheses I'm going to put the item I want to add, and I'm going to add Michelle. Let's display now all the items in the array. Go back to the browser. So these 3 last items were all added with a different method, but equally good and equally functional. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items in this array. I can also add items to the front of the array. So I'm going to add a little comment here. I'm going to say adding items to the beginning of an array. There we go. And to be able to do that, we use the name of the array. And another method, very unintuitive. I never understood the choice of wording for this method, but you know, there you go. I have no say on what the names should be for this method. So you're going to use unshift. I have no idea where it comes from. So if I want to add another name or another item at the very beginning of my array, so all these were ways of adding items to the end of the array, but this is the beginning of the array. So if I wanted to add an item, let's say I want to add Jack to the beginning of the array, I have to use unshift. There we go. Let's save that, and let me bring this alert. I'm going to copy, paste it here, and run this again. This is our array, and then we add another item in the very front. Let me run this again. So this is my array. Starts with John, it ends with Michelle. And now the array starts with Jack and ends with Michelle. Now, why wouldn't something like players 0 equal Helen work? Well, what you do if you do this, you actually changing. So you're not adding anything by using this method. You're changing the item in position 1 with an index of 0 from whatever we added here is Jack to Helen. So let's try that. I'm going to comment this out. So we only don't want to display the array here when we add Jack to the front. And when we do players 0 equal Helen, we will change that first value to Helen. Save that and run this. All right, so our array starts with Jack and ends with Michelle. And now the first item has been changed to Helen and the array still ends with Michelle. We have the same number of items in our array. Okay, let's keep on going here. Okay, so we've seen how to add items. What about if you want to remove items from an array? So let's enter a comment here, removing items from the end of an array. So if I want to do that, we have to use another method, the pop method. So if I do players.pop with nothing inside a parenthesis, this is going to remove the last item. So let's copy and paste this. And let's see what happens here. Go back to the browser. All right, so we have our array being displayed. The item add is Jack. Then we switch it to Helen, and it ends with Michelle. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items. And now I have removed the last item from my array. Now, if you want to save that item for whatever reason, you could save that into a variable. So you could create a variable that, you can call it what you want, but it would make sense to call it something like last. So now I'm still removing that item from the array, but I'm actually not just losing it completely. I'm saving it inside a variable called last. And if I really, really wanted to, I could display that by itself just to prove that we still have it. So go back to the browser. Or big array, we're changing the first item, we're removing the last item, which was Michelle, and now we're displaying that last item that's been saved into a variable. And you can do the same thing from the beginning, at the beginning of an array. Let me just comment out some of these alerts. I'm just starting to have a little bit too many. So like, how about removing an item or removing items from the beginning of an array. You use players and you use the the method shift. Once again, very confusing. So what this is doing is just removing the first item of our array. So let's display players. All right, so this is our big array. Oh, let me go back. Let me delete one or comment out one more alert. There's just too many here. There we go. That's the one, I believe. Alert, alert, alert. Yes, okay. Back to this. Okay, I just want to reload this. Okay, so here we have our array with the last item removed, and it's saved into a variable that we're displaying. Now I remove an extra item, and this time I removed it from the front. Remember there was Helen right here, and I removed that element from there. It might be And just like we did before, we can actually save what is being removed from the front of the array into a variable. So if I put the word var first in front of player shift, whatever is being removed from the front is saved inside a variable, and I can just go ahead and display that variable. Let's save this and replay this. My array where Michelle removed, Michelle is displayed by itself, and my array with a front removed, and Helen, the first item that was removed, displayed by itself. And this concludes what I wanted to cover for arrays. I wanted to show you what your assignment might look like. I'm asking you to use some of the concepts that we looked over today and last week and create an array, two arrays actually, that store information about songs and colors. And I would like to show you here how this is going to work out, what I like to see. So if I reload the assignment, this is my example, I have a prompt window that comes up and is asking me what song do you want to play, and I, the user, have to select a possible value, and the possible values are here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if I select, for example, the value of 2 and click OK, I have a name of a song. That's the name of the song that's stored in the second position of my songs array, and I have a certain background color for my document. If I reload this and I choose a different number, let's say I choose the number 5 and click OK, now I have a different color for my background and a different name of a song. This is what I came up with. You can definitely make this look even more interesting. What we can do with JavaScript is slightly limited still because we haven't seen functions, and so we haven't seen also logic. So whatever happens when a user loads the document, it's always limited to whatever information we can gather with prompt, for example. Next week, when we're going to start talking about logic, you'll see that we'll have tools to be able to actually make decisions. For example, if the user says something, we'll do a certain action, and if the user chooses something else, we'll do a different action. And later on, we'll see functions, and we'll add even more functionality. But for the moment, it's all. Until next time.